Hello, BookTube. Today I'm off work, so I thought I'd go ahead and do a reading update. I kind of wanted to do more of those Friday Reads videos, but they never seem to work out with my schedule. But I will do them when I can, otherwise I'll do these sort of reading updates. And I've actually got 5 books that I've already finished this year. A couple of them I had already started near the end of the year. That's why I've kind of gotten through so many books. But yeah, let's just go ahead and jump in. Out of the 5, all of them are pretty much 3-star reads that I put on Goodreads. Good stories, entertaining, not just stellar blew my socks off kind of reads. But the first one I want to talk about is The Dead Assassin. This is by Von Entwistle. This is the second book in the paranormal case books of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. The first one was The Revenant of Thraxton Hall, which I absolutely loved. Our main characters are Dr. Doyle and Oscar Wilde. In this second one here, we're in Victorian England. There's a lot of political upheaval going on, a lot of protests, there's terrorist bombings. It's just a bit of a mess going on. And Dr. Doyle is having dinner at the beginning of the book with Jean Leckie. She's also a member of the Society for Psychical Research, and he also is kind of having a bit of a crush on her. A lot of the interaction between the two of them, and him just being infatuated with her, gets a little bit monotonous throughout the book, and a little disturbing because he's still married at this moment, although his wife is terminally ill, and she's sort of given him like the kind of go ahead because she doesn't want him to be like alone after she passes. But it's still kind of disturbing. I think I found a little bit troubling. But anyway, be that as it may, while they're having dinner, a detective shows up pretty much covered in blood from the scene of a crime, kind of freaking out everybody, desperate for Doyle's help, knowing that he is with his, Sherlock Holmes, he must have some sort of knowledge, and he's just flabbergasted by a crime that he's investigating currently and drags Doyle into it. And he brings Wilde along with him, you might say. And what they do is they come across the murder victim is a member of the government who has been brutally murdered to the point where his head has basically been twisted completely around. There's a trail of blood which ends up leading to apparently the attacker. Apparently the government member was able to fire off several shots before he was killed, but they find the body of the attacker. The shocking thing is that the detective recognizes him as a recently executed prisoner. It was been some 2 weeks ago where he hung at Newgate Prison, and now here he is up and walking around killing somebody else. So that's where we get the title, The Dead Assassin. I'd say this one wasn't quite as intriguing of a mystery as the other one was. It's kind of put out right there in front of you who the murderer is. It's just a matter of proving it and how they did it and that kind of a thing. And how suddenly we have these, reanimated corpses walking around committing murder. There's also another troubling scene involving Oscar Wilde attending a party at a Marquis's house. Lots of drugs and sex. It's basically an orgy taking place. And the troubling part, and at least Wilde reacts appropriately, he comes across 2 children at this home in kind of very grim circumstances, where he immediately grabs them, runs off, and basically describes the Marquis as, better than Caligula. But it was still kind of troubling reading the circumstances and things. So bear that in mind if you come across that one. But overall, just the whole point, the idea of these dead assassins, kind of Frankenstein-like, was pretty interesting, but not a real deep mystery that kind of fell through. And like I said, the whole part with the Jean Leckie part got a little tiring. But we'll see where the next one goes, because I like the interactions with the characters enough that I want to continue with the series. Next up was an audiobook that I listened to, The Cartographers by Peng Shepherd. I'd previously read the Book of M by this author, which I wasn't too thrilled with. This one features our main character, Nell Young. She has always dreamed of being a cartographer like her father. He is well known in the industry. He worked at the New York Public Library, where she kind of worked for a while until he basically got her fired over a gas station map. She had come across a junk box full of maps in the archives. There's so many maps that were in the archives. She thought she had some free time. She wanted to go through and kind of help out. And she came across some other interesting maps within this box. And there's this other one, this gas station map. And there was something odd about it, but she brought it to her father and wanted him to really look at it, and he just kept kind of putting it off until they got into a bit of an argument about it, and eventually it drove enough of a wedge that she ends up getting fired over this junk box map. At the beginning part of the story, she finds out that her father has died of kind of suspect circumstances, may have been murdered. She goes to the library, to his office, and happens to come across a secret drawer within the desk where she finds this set map. Shocked that he still has it. Why does he still have it? He said it was worthless. And upon further investigation, she finds out it may not be quite as worthless as her father said. Why did he hang on to it? Why is someone buying up all these maps of the same particular map and then subsequently seeming to destroy them? There's something going on, and more murders kind of follow in its path and chasing after her. So overall, the interesting thing that you find out about the map was intriguing. I just felt like, I don't know, I wasn't too happy with the ending. It was a bit too ambiguous for me. I wasn't satisfied with the way it all wrapped up, but the overall story leading up to it was good, and the concept of it I thought was really good. So it was entertaining. I enjoyed that. Next up, I finished a book that I had sitting on my shelves for quite some time. This one, I'd say it's kind of more of like a YA book. It seems geared for like a younger type of reader. And this is The Dead Fathers Club by Matt Haig. I remember buying this because it sounded really interesting, and I just love the kind of wraparound cover. And the concept is basically a retelling of Hamlet. But our main character is Philip Noble. He's, I think, 11 or 12. And at the beginning, he's attending his father's funeral when suddenly his father's ghost shows up along with other members of the Dead Fathers Club, fathers who have been murdered. And his father says, you know, his uncle, Philip's uncle, murdered him, did something to his car, and hence he died in a car accident. And his uncle seems to be getting kind of close to his mother, and he's saying, you know, you've got to avenge my death, or I'll be stuck here. I'll be, you know, in the terrors, they call it, kind of reliving his death over and over again, unless Philip does something, basically murder his uncle, which is a bit disturbing. I don't know, set in the time of Hamlet and that time period, I don't know, it seems a little less disturbing than, you know, more in modern day time, and a father telling his 11-year-old son to commit murder. A little rough there. That didn't sit too well with me. It's told in an interesting sort of way. As you're, I don't know if you noticed that. You wouldn't really notice it if you're listening to it, say it on an audiobook, but reading the text and stuff, it's very stream of conscious. There's very little in the way of punctuation other than the period. There's no like commas, no quotation marks. There's a lot of I said, then she said, then I said, she said, he said, I said, as you're going across. And the stream of consciousness is kind of interesting at times, but it's just odd that they decided to write it in that manner. Yeah, I was a little disturbed about, I guess, it being such a young boy, specifically tasked with this thing. It has all the other kind of typical things you would correlate with Hamlet in terms of the confusion, the second, you know, the doubt about what to do, and then there's the girl interest. There's a young girl that he's always been kind of bullied, and there's one girl that has always kind of come to his aid and his truest friend, and so that kind of girl interest kind of taking him away from his main task, and yeah, the uncle, mother, all that, and that relationship that's building between the two of them, and how it disturbs him, and all that's kind of, you know, you'll see that those kind of correlations with Hamlet. But overall, again, it was about a 3-star read. Interesting, oddly told format, but I still enjoyed it. Next up, I'll go with this one. This is a cozy mystery, the first in the World Traveler mystery series, entitled Perils in Provence by Carolyn L. Dean. Okay, and this features our main character, Jennifer. She used to be a baker at Ravenwood Cove, but now she's accepted a job by this guy. I think his name was Gable London. He basically is a rich kind of guy who goes around buying up properties and, you know, turning them over. And he sends her out on a job. Basically, she gets to travel the world. So hence she's given up her job as a baker and, a chance to kind of travel. And so she's gone to this kind of derelict winery to investigate the property. And she's pretending she's like an insurance investigator to kind of not let on that people are selling the property. And while they're, you get a lot of the setting and the wines and the beautiful. I mean, just look at that. and one of my favorite characters is I forgot his name now. Orly? I think it was Orly. He's a little French bulldog, which he's on all the covers apparently at that lower corner. So he will feature in the next book as well. But while they're, one of the staff ends up murdered, and so she can't leave, and she's got to kind of figure out what's going on. There's some interesting things hidden on the property. But overall, not a really in-depth mystery. It seemed to end pretty quickly once things started rolling. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the setting, and I'll probably pick up another one sometime. Next book that I finished is another Darcy Coates book. If you follow my channel, I've read quite a few of hers. She writes horror books, lots of haunted house stories. This one is entitled The Haunting of Blackwood House. And this one features our main character, Mara. Her childhood was full of seances and mediums and people telling her that she had some kind of gift. She never really believed in a lot of that. She didn't like being put in those situations. She eventually, as she becomes an adult, kind of breaks ties with her parents and leaves. And now her current living situation is not really great. She's living in this kind of really cheap apartment with not really great neighbors and needs to get out. And she's got some viewing of different places coming up, and one that she's really had her heart set on falls through at the last minute, and the realtor has one suggestion, Blackwood House, but she's very hesitant to even recommend it because of the history behind it. It's apparently been described as very haunted, that several murders took place in there. There's apparently a serial killer that hung himself in there, and she doesn't care. She doesn't believe in any of it. She never believed in any of it. So even though her boyfriend, Neil, was her boyfriend? Yeah, Neil. He's very Catholic, raised in a Catholic family, but he's still kind of hesitant about it. He says, "You sure you want this? This sounds creepy. There was a serial killer that used to live here and all this." And she's like, she has her heart set on it because it's within her budget. It's huge, a lot bigger than she was going to be moving into, and decides, yeah, it's going to need work. It's been derelict for quite some time, but she feels like it's better than the place she used to live in. She's kind of drawn to it, and they will find out the reason she's drawn to it further down the road. And lots of course, things start to happen in the house, and it does have that really good creepy factor. She does that very well. She really, the house, the description of the house and the settings and everything. Yeah, you could feel every creak. You feel like you could hear every creak and every cobweb and every hole in the wall and falling plaster, and just really, really great descriptions of it. But again, overall, I thought it was like a 3-star read. Just a really, your basic cozy haunted. That's what I call them. They're like cozies. It's like you just kind of can read right through them, and but very entertaining. Out of all the ones that I've finished, probably this is like my favorite out of that bunch. Next up, I think, is just the ones that I'm currently reading. And I'll start with this one. This is A Villa in Sicily, subtitled Vino and Death. You can barely read that, like down in this area right here. This is book 3 in the Cats and Dogs Cozy Mystery Series by Fiona Grace. I read the first 2. I think the first one I got as a free ebook, and I fell in love with it. Immediately bought the second one, then gave myself a little bit of a break, and then I just felt like after reading the one in Provence, I felt like going back to Italy, in this case Sicily, and just reliving that. Our main character, Audrey Smart, is a vet. She was getting fed up with her, not her patients, but her patients' owners back home. She loves the animals, the people she could deal without, but she decides she's kind of had it with that bunch, and although she still wants to be a vet, she still loves animals and just needs a new setting. And reads an article about these $1 homes in Sicily. And this is a real thing. They're very old villages, kind of derelict. A lot of the buildings are crumbling down, and trying to repopulate the towns and rebuild it and everything. They offer these homes for $1 with the provision that you have to refurbish it like within a year or so, bring everything back up to code and everything, and build the town back up. And she jumps at it. And the town actually is happy that she's coming in, because she's also a vet, and they desperately need a vet. There's a lot of strays and things running around. So this particular one, apparently there is a inspector going around now checking to see the progress that's been made in the properties. And there's one also American nearby neighbor that is building up his house and stuff, and helps her out a lot with a lot of the renovations, because she's not really that great at that kind of a thing. So she can do some basic things, but she desperately needs his help. But he's also working on his home, and now here's this inspector kind of adding to the pressure. And he doesn't quite like what he sees when he gets at first. He's understanding. He knows that she's kind of trying to fix up the veterinary office, and he says he has to inspect that place as well. And so she's kind of under pressure for 2 locations. But when he gets to her home, at first he's like, well, yeah, the pipes rattle. That's kind of understandable. This is done. Oh, that's been worked on. Okay, that's okay. Till he gets to the 2nd floor and realizes there's a gaping hole that she's just put a board over it. And he's like, sorry, you can't live in this place until this is fixed. So now she's without a place to live, and that's kind of where I'm at right now. There's going to be, according to I think it was the description, I believe a murder will take place, of course, but I think it's the inspector. I think that's who it's described as. So it's not going to look good for her either if being one of those people that's, been booted out of your home by this guy, could she be a suspect now? But I really enjoy the characters that I've come across in the story, and the settings and the animals, and I really love this one. I think the other ones have been pretty high up on my reads, usually like about 5-star reads or so. I've also picked up one of the books that I had mentioned on a previous video of a book that's been on my shelf for a long time. I think this one might be a YA one as well. It's entitled Click, one novel by 10 authors. It came wrapped like this when I got it at a library sale. And these are the authors. Some of you may recognize some of them. And our main characters are Maggie and Jason. Their grandfather, George, or G as he's known, was a famous photographer, and he recently passed away and left them with some kind of mysterious gifts. Not so much with Jason, although he receives the camera equipment and also some photographs of various sports figures, all autographed to Jason. Later on, he'll come across this kind of note left from George or G to him. In terms of Maggie, she receives a box that has like 7 compartments, and inside are various shells. And then there's odd letters when she flips them up that represent something, and she's kind of have to figure out what these shells, and the letters, how they correspond, or what he's trying to tell her. Although he did leave her a note saying to throw them back. Where they came from, that's what she has to find out. And as the story is told, it's sort of like stories within stories. So you have Maggie and Jason's own stories. And then the people that G has kind of encountered along the way. The stories were like a very big thing with G and Maggie particularly, but Jason when he was a bit younger. But G would come home from his photographic expeditions, and he'd have all these stories, but he'd always want to hear a story from them first. And Maggie was very into that. She'd tell a story of like some event or something that took place in her life, and then he would share his interesting stories. So he's encountered lots of people, and we'll see like through some of the investigations that Maggie's doing with the shells and stuff, and we come to learn a lot more about G, and so do her family. Kind of had a bit of a hidden life, and So each of these chapters is a little bit of like of another story of someone that he's encountered, and so far it's pretty good. I'm about like halfway through that so far. And let's see. So I'm reading Villa in Sicily, I'm reading Click, and then for my audiobook, this is a kind of a revisit for me. It's been a long time since I've encountered books by the author, and it's recently come out as a new omnibus. This is volume 1, and it's Michael Moorcock's Elric of Melniboné. This is the first volume, and I just love the artwork on this cover. Okay, and apparently this one has in these contents here. There's a One Life furnished in early Moorcock by Neil Gaiman, which I'll talk about in a minute. Elric of Melniboné, and then there's The Fortress of the Pearl, The Sailor on the Seas of Fate, and The Weird of the White Wolf. Editing Sue here, jumping in. I kind of forgot to mention about that short story by Neil Gaiman at the beginning of the Elric of Melniboné volume. And I've seen a lot of reviews about this referencing just to skip it. I highly recommend just skipping it. It has barely anything to do with Elric other than the main character, a young boy, used to write fan fiction and was fascinated by the Elric stories. There's just a few mentions of Elric and the author, Michael Moorcock, within the short story, but other than that, it's basically amounts to like a child pornography story. It's talking constantly about this character and his fellow students' masturbation habits, and what the heck does this have anything to do with a fantasy series on about Elric? I found it disturbing, and I just couldn't wait for it to pass. I was stuck listening to it because I didn't know exactly where the actual stories began on the Audible listen, but I would not bother reading it and or listening to it. Now, the interesting thing is, when I read this series, the books were like in little skinny little paperbacks, and there was a set of like, I think it was 6 of them. They kind of looked like that. And the first 3 were not the ones I just mentioned. There was Elric of Melniboné, then there was The Sailor on the Seas of Fate, and The Weird of the White Wolf. The book entitled The Fortress of the Pearl, if you go on Goodreads, you'll see it listed as number 8 in the series. Now, that's where it gets kind of confusing. So I don't know if I am, this particular omnibus here, this volume of it, if this is the order in which Moorcock preferred the books to be read in, as opposed to when they were originally out and the way I read them. I'm not sure. I'm going to have to dive a little bit further into that. A lot of the stories, in a way, there are just collections of short stories of his adventures in the Young Kingdoms and stuff like that. Elric is referred to often as the Eternal Champion. You'll see him in different guises in other series that Moorcock created, in terms of like Hawkmoon and I forgot some of the other characters. It's been a while, but I had read other ones within the Eternal Champion series, but it's been so long. And like I said, I'm kind of curious as to which version I'm reading at this point now. I like the original 6 I read, and I kind of just wanted to revisit that, and I was hoping that now when this was released that that's what I was getting. But not quite. Like I said, I am getting book 1, book 8, book 2, and book 3 in this first volume. And then the second one is called Stormbringer. And then the third volume is The Weird of the White Wolf, which is odd because that is in this book. So, and the cover art I've seen on that one is completely different from these first 2 volumes. And I really absolutely love the cover art of this one. But he's a very interesting character. He's an albino emperor of Melniboné. I'll talk more about it when I kind of revisit, like I said, the series. But if you're looking for really good fantasy, definitely recommend this author. So yeah, that's kind of what I've been reading, what I finished, and what I'm currently reading. If you guys encountered any of these books or these authors, what do you think about them? Let me know down below in the comments, and I will see you in my next video. Bye-bye.